Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Uyghur Human Rights Project's book launch event. Uyghur Human Rights Project honored to and pleased to organize this event titled Uyghur Women Activists in the Diaspora, Restoring a Genocide. In this event, we would like to have discussion with one of the distinguished speakers, Dr. Susan J. Palmer, and also contributors of this book. And the event is moderated by our best friend, Dr. Sophie Richardson. Now, I don't wish to take off much time of everybody, so I'm going to give the floor to our distinguished moderator. Sophie, please, floor is yours.
Thank you so much for inviting me to join you. It's really a pleasure to be with you. And I want to start by encouraging everyone to read this book. I learned a great deal from it, and I'm confident that even people who watch the situation closely will benefit. We are going to take questions at the end from the audience, so you should feel free to post them in the comments. And I'm going to introduce our fantastic panel as I work through a set of questions. So without further ado, I want to start with Professor Susan Palmer, who, in addition to writing this remarkable book, is also a professor of sociology at Concordia University and a member of the religious studies faculty at McGill University. She's a busy woman. But I wanted to start by asking Susan to tell us more about how she got into this project, and particularly her interest in combining a theoretical approach to the idea of restorying with these particular women and their stories, and whether you had a particular goal in mind in doing this work. Please, the floor is yours.
Well, that's an excellent question, Sophie. If I go on too long, you can cut me off. First of all, I became fascinated with China and fascinated with the Uyghur problem when I was invited by the People's Security Ministry in Beijing to give a series of lectures on what they call Xijiao in China, which means cults in English, which they perceive as criminal organizations. And of course, as a sociologist who strives for objectivity and so on, I was trying to say, yes, these groups are totally harmless except for a few. And at the same time, I was receiving news about the re-education camps in Xinjiang through my friend on my email, even though I guess I couldn't have gone on the internet and found it out when I was in China. And I was absolutely, I was in this weird situation where I was staying at the beautiful hotel of the police in Beijing and then reading all these terrible things that were going on. So when I got back to McGill, I decided to study the Uyghurs. And I hired two wonderful Uyghur researchers and journalists and a scholar. And they helped me make sense of it all, because it was a brand new field for me. And they suggested we interview these women activists because they'd functioned as interpreters and so on. So we got in touch with them, and I found their stories so compelling, and it shed so much light on what was going on in China that I really decided I must publish these stories somehow. So then I searched for a framework, and my background is sociology of religion. So I wanted to sort of have a distance from it and not be too, I didn't want to become an activist myself. I didn't want to be too emotional. So I chose this theory of narrative analysis or restorying, which is sort of a popular theory. And actually, I find it pretty boring, to tell you the truth. But the advantage is it gave me a kind of distance from the phenomenon, because I focused on stories. And so I simply said, and I think it was very relevant to the situation in East Turkestan, because China is so opaque. We don't really know what's going on. Only we depend entirely on the stories of the people who leave. And of course, aerial photography. So the stories are very, very important now. That's all we have really as ammunition. So I compare the stories that Beijing tells, about what they think they want the world to believe is going on, and what the women activists say and the men activists do, and then what scholars say and what the media says. So at the end, I have a section where I compare how they frame the story. So it was a very good theory for me to sort of gain a distance as a sociologist and frame my approach. I'm not a China expert by any means, so this was convenient theory for me.
Great, thank you for explaining that. There's a lot in there. We'll come to this in a minute, talking about what it means to surface this kind of information and how those conversations take place, and juxtaposing them against an official narrative. Susan, I think you're one of the only people I know who's been invited by the public security authorities for the purpose that you described a moment ago. But I want to turn to Diaspora Mahmut, who's a scientist and a Uyghur activist also based in Canada, to ask her to talk a little bit about how you first learned about Susan's project and came to be involved in it.
Yeah, I was muted, sorry. Good morning, and it's really good to see you all here. I came to learn about this work from my Uyghur network, I can say. This a person, actually, one of the other, Dilmurat Mahmut. So I get to know from him. I was working with him in my advocacy work. He was my really dedicated supporter in my advocacy and also an active participant of my advocacy work. So he still is. And he talked to me about this work. And so at the beginning, I was a little bit hesitant because I grew up in an environment, personal story, personal view, personal opinion were not valued. However, I get to learn that in Canada, in general, in the West, a personal story, the true story is more valued than a newspaper. So I think it's good chance for me to express my experience, also talk about behind those people not able to tell the truth. So that's my motivation. At the same time, regardless of why the media discussion of the Uyghur plight, I believe what we can see in West is only the tip of the iceberg. So I was hoping this book serve as like new interpretations of historical events of oppressed Uyghurs, highlights overlooked aspects by media or West, and reveals the truth about the genocide, specifically which not known for people, which lasted much longer than people initially knew. So that's my my motivation to participate in this work.
Thanks for sharing that. It's remarkable how much detail there is in all of these stories in very personalized ways that, brings a very different feel to what I think can sometimes seem like a very political or diplomatic or legal discussion. It's both very evocative, but also very chilling to hear some of the details about people's stories. Zubaira, I want to turn to you next and ask a little bit more of an advocacy-focused question. Zubaira obviously is the Chinese outreach coordinator at the Uyghur Human Rights Project and the elected vice president of the World Uyghur Congress. Way to go. We've known each other for a long time, and I've heard you talk about a lot of your experiences in the homeland. And I learned a lot from your descriptions and some of the other people's descriptions about endless experiences of very personalized forms of discrimination, about being denied the opportunity to express your own identity, or even engaging in kinds of protests or other sorts of political behavior that you knew were risky. So I'm curious to hear you talk about what it was that made you, on getting to Australia or getting to the US, decide to keep doing this kind of work, right? When you had made it someplace where you could have spent your time doing different, less complicated, less risky, less heartbreaking work, what made you want to stay in this universe doing this kind of, being engaged in this kind of effort?
Thank you very much, Sophie. And this is a great question and a tough question. I think, yes, I lived in great countries like Australia and America. The both of them are free and democratic places which we never had experienced back home in our country. You know what? Especially people in here on this panel understand deeply that life is not just only about living in peace, having a good life, having a great house, luxury car, or just to having fun, enjoy whatever we have and whatever we've been offered. It's not that. Especially people like us, for us it's just impossible to just move forward with the luxury that we are able to gain. Whatever we do, wherever I live, whatever I have been through, it's just impossible to get rid of from my mind. And as a human being, as a woman, and also as a mother, teacher, or whatever, a translator, interpreter, researcher. So each time, whatever I do, every minute of my life, everything that I have to always relates to, connects to my homeland. It's just impossible for me to live aside. I mean, yes, I did try to. That was the first thinking, even not first thinking. And this question is not first time asked question from me. Even one of my friends who we studied together at the university and did high degree, and even she was first time told me when she came to Australia saying that, look, Zubaira, why don't you just move forward, move on, forget about everything? Because look, this is what a great opportunity in here, great education opportunity, great work opportunity, great life. And you have wonderful family. Why don't you just keep move on, do something do something great in this country. Just be one of the Western person. And I said, is it possible? While my people are suffering over there, the people who I love, my family members, and especially, while my brother is in jail, how would it's possible for me that I feel this freedom? Yes, I'm free. More you're free, more you enjoy the freedom and the democracy, and the more you feel and more you compare what Uyghurs have done to suffer so much. Aren't we the human being as well? Aren't we? Why? And it's just, so many questions all the time. I can tell you a very one simple thing. Just please stop me if I just keep going. Like when I first came to Australia, and the first thing I have done was learning language, because English wasn't my first language as well. I mean, not second language, not third language even. So when I was at school, the first day, what I realized was, wow, what a freedom in here. If instead of me, there were other Uyghurs with me together, look, if they had this opportunity, how would they be? Because we had such great, smart kids in our school. The same at the university when I did my degree, and saying, wow, what a freedom. Even within the university, we don't have choice. We don't have to choose sometimes in what we want to do. Like even natural science, social science, you can't just cross around and you can just interchange. Like for example, even for me to apply for study international studies from computer science it was just impossible in China. But that's what I did in Australia. But at that every moment, the things that we are unable to do in our country, it brings me back. What if? Why? I mean, those opportunities, those things is my people that deserve. And we should be having it. Why not? That was the question. And the thinking of all the things. Every step that I took, every work that I have done, everything that I do always reminds me of my home, my people. So it is just impossible for me. So for me, it doesn't make any difference whether I live in Australia, I live in America, or even in Africa. It doesn't matter. My spirit is still back home. My mind is still with my people. My idea, my thoughts still with them. It doesn't matter whether it's about my relatives, my brother, sister, my brother in jail, or other relatives who's in concentration camps right now. It doesn't make any difference. To me, it's everybody is my brother, sisters. Every Uyghur, every suffering Uyghur is my relative. So
I see a lot of heads nodding, and I think people who are listening will identify very strongly, with the way you've just made that point beautifully. And it actually reminds me of my wonderful former colleague, Yaqiao Wang, who's now at Freedom House, who speaks very, very movingly about, what the world might look like if people across China were emancipated to study and write and think and debate freely. The kind of creativity, the kind of cultural output, the scientific work that, what having that kind of freedom might mean, but also that living in a free environment, brings with it an opportunity and a sense of obligation to put that freedom to use in service of others. Speaking of service to others, I want to turn to the extraordinary Gulchera Hoxha, who's one of, I think, Radio Free Asia's greatest journalists ever, and someone I've had the privilege to work with for a very long time. And Gul's work, as I think many people know, has been really critically important in breaking stories about what's been happening in the Uyghur region, about mass arbitrary detention, about torture, about family separations. And Gul, you've written about in your own remarkable book, about your own personal stories, some of which is extremely challenging, and reporting on terrible abuses that people have endured. And I think one parallel I see between your work and what Susan is trying to accomplish in this new book is telling stories about very hard subjects. But I'd be interested to hear how you in your own work try to do this without re-traumatizing the people that you're interviewing. How do we tell hard stories without asking people to again and again and again repeat these terrible experiences that they've endured?
Thank you for the moving speech, Zubaira. Being a journalist today, especially if you are Uyghur, you're gonna be targeted by Chinese government, of course. But we have a saying, a man will die for the dignity. Yes, human dignity is more valuable than human life. I believe that. So, and I also believe that those of us who are sitting here in the event, also behind the screen, many Uyghur women and men are the ones who are living to protect our pride. So no matter how they are subjected to humiliation and persecution, direct or indirect oppression, if there are, people like you and me, us, I believe this nation will not be perish, because we can rebuild our nation. I can proudly say that because in my 20-something years of journalistic experience, I've been talking to so many Uyghurs in the exile, also in the Uyghur region. They all loving to be Uyghur and the pride to be Uyghur. You see that soul, the inspiration. Every time I talk with those people, especially those Uyghurs who suffering for their nation and still happily can talk their, life and their pride, it actually makes me more stronger. During those interviews, I actually grow with them, learn with them, and I am so feel like very lucky to doing journalistic job. Journalism not just like light up the problem in the Uyghur region or the China, also light up the hope to give people hope, especially like this Suzanne's book. It gives our a generation to start to follow. It's hope. It's giving them, wow, we were women, so powerful, and they have something to look up. And it's very important, especially in these days. Chinese government wants to just break our hope and everything we have. So I have been reporting for RFA more than 20 years about the repression and the persecution of the Uyghurs. So, and yet Chinese government, which is determined to wipe us out mercilessly. The name of the destruction is 4 breaks: break their lineage, break their roots, break their connections, and break their origins. So, the purpose of to break everything in us, in our life and in our future, it is to make us living, corpses, neither dead nor alive, somewhere in between. This in between is horrific. It is, so we are all fighting for survive, like even in your Uyghur land or exile. So what we are doing, whatever we are doing, just for the exist as a Uyghur, as a human being. So I am just doing that simply.
Simply, that's all.
Yeah, that's all. We must do. Because we have freedom, as Zubaira mentioned, because we have freedom to do that.
Gul, you always explain very complicated work, I think, in very compelling terms about not just moral obligations, but also, one of the other important points that the book makes is about remembering and about memory and about personal histories and their relevance, as people go out into the world. And sort of in that same vein, I want to turn back to Razia to ask about, her current reality, in that the section about Razia in the book starts with a very painful description about the difficulty that you had communicating with your own sisters because they were already being educated in Chinese, which you didn't yet speak. I want the audience to know that Razia now speaks at least 5 different languages. And then the section about you in the book ends with your discussing with your daughter aspects of your family history and sort of the larger situation in the region. I guess I'd be interested to hear you talk a little bit about how you share those experiences, but also what sort of a future that your daughter might have with respect to her own Uyghur identity. There are complexities around this. I'd be interested just to hear you talk about that.
Thank you. Sophie, it's really hard question, actually. Intergenerational trauma, which is almost every Uyghur is suffering, was suffering, and still is suffering. This intergenerational trauma is not only is not created just now. It was related to tied to story of cultural and political repression, which extends beyond the first generation. if you look at from the historical context, the intergenerational trauma was started with the colonization of the East Turkestan in 1950s. As an example, my dad was exiled to a remote rural mountain forest area, accusing him being a revisionist, left behind my mom and my three siblings. They were at age of 0 to 5. At that time, this was called Shusan, which means expelling. This is started early 50s. And in 60s, he was accused again being a counter-revolutionist, again transferred to another rural county. So similar stories keep happening, keep going. We can find like in many Uyghur families. So I still remember my friend's dad, my good childhood friend's dad came back home with leg impairments after 7 years of imprisonment for being accused counter-revolutionist. When he was taken, my friend, she was still a baby. And this is like, so one or two examples of many examples. So long years of separation and the lifelong pain and the trauma left in their lives a scare, pain for forever. And if we talk about recent development, so the family separation and the intergenerational trauma is still ongoing, following on the mass detention since 2016. The Uyghurs, including children, were witnessing family members being detained, being disappeared. The children sent to state-sponsored orphanage and causing anxiety, depression, worry, which can pass through generation. This genocide have been destroyed our traditional family structure, community structure. So this led to our young generation lost emotional support and sense of belongingness and even facing identity crisis. I believe this disconnection lost across generations. So even not this intergenerational trauma is not affected our people inside, my people inside of East Turkestan, Xinjiang. Actually, lots of young generation, young people, this in second generation in diaspora also significantly affected. For example, in 2019, I was interviewed by CBC Radio Canada, and my daughter was also invited to this interview. So during the interview, she became emotional. I saw a deep sadness on her. This is for the first time I felt the heaviness of burden I had put on her shoulder. So this is not only happened on me. I know around people, friends, a lot of trauma directly transferred to kids, children, even young, not like kids, teenagers. So this intergenerational trauma is the main goal of CCP Chinese government to destroy our nation from generation to generation, left scars, pains to whole nation. But I think they reached, in some points, they reached their goal. So it's very hard, but I can see every day in my everyday life how people psychologically affect every one of us in Canada and worldwide.
Razia, thank you so much for speaking about what are some very, very hard issues. I think especially because as we talk about them, people are more aware, I think, of the realities that we're not just talking about abuses that take place someplace else far away and that only affect people who are in the region or people who have come directly, but that rather these are traumas that get handed down from one generation to the next. And I think one of the most extraordinary responses that some Uyghur organizations and individuals have engaged in is providing support and mental health counseling and other resources for people who are grappling with these very serious problems. So I want to especially applaud those efforts. And Zubaira, maybe we can...
Yeah, I can just add to something what Razia is saying. I mean, yes, I perfectly understand what she's been describing. You know, that the package that we came with us to the West that's that one. You know, that's how powerful it is. It is not only just makes us become a advocate for those voiceless and suppressed, and it's so powerful that it kind of consciously, unconsciously, it inherits to the rest of the family members as well. I mean, maybe Razia did not tell her full story to her children. She may not educate her children to become one of her, you know, just the role, something like that. But consciously, unconsciously, because that's how we live in our house, and that's how we act, do things in our house and outside of house, whether our personal life, professional life, family life. As I told you before, every single minute of our breathing is directly relates, connects, involves with our cause. And that directly affects our generation, our children as well. The same situation with my children. I never educate or told my children to become Uyghur activists, you know, fighters, do something about your people. Yes, I did educate them just to remember who you are, because that's the main thing. It doesn't matter, you know, where we live. We should recognize ourselves, and I'm proud of to be who I am. So that's the main thing, and that's what I wish my generation to pick up as well. And that's what they did, but they pick up more than that. And come back to the trauma that we have been through because of all this situation. Definitely there are organizations, you know, doing something, like, for example, the Uyghur Wellness Initiative. It is kind of collaborative effort by Uyghur Human Rights Project, Uyghur American Association, Campaign for Uyghur, you know, few organizations, and also Peace Catalyst. They jointly initiate that project, and which is main focus is to help, support, provide counseling or mental, spiritual support to the people who's affected this kind of secondary trauma or any trauma, anyone. So that service is available to all worldwide. You can reach out to Uyghur Wellness Initiative through website, and there is contact information as well. So the purpose is that, you know, we have to be strong, I mean, no matter what. And we should not give in to what China is planning to destroy us. So that's the plan. I think this may also come up later as well. So how Chinese government is trying to destroy us through transnational repression. And this is part of it as well. It's, you know, emotionally destroying us. And they knew, and it's planned. However, they planned to have established concentration camps for Uyghurs and destroy us within East Turkestan. The same aim, same goal is, you know, exists, you know, through the transnational repression as well. I may stop here, and I'll probably add more later. Thank you.
No, that's great, Zubaira. Thank you. I think it's an important topic to bring up, particularly in the context of the issues that this book addresses. And I think we'll come back to Susan in a minute to talk a little bit more about how these stories are in some ways affirmations. But just before we do that, I want to go back to Gold to ask her to say a little bit more about the work that you've done documenting atrocities and interviewing people. But I guess I'm curious to hear you talk a little bit about the affirmative side, the parts of this work that you're most proud of, or that the aspects of it that you find most uplifting.
Yeah. Sophie, you dealing with those issues like more than me, actually, human rights. And human rights abuses, it has long history in the Uyghur region since East Turkestan occupied by Chinese government, of course. But after Xi Jinping stepped up the genocidal policy, is start, and we approximately saying it's from the 2016, but we noticed that their preparation, the systematic crackdown way before the 2016, they begin to target religious people at first in 2014-15. Then they arrested who visited foreign countries because they think they have the influence of the freedom mind. And then we saw all the Uyghur elites gone just in several months, including, of course, my family members. Also, they target not only the elites in the Uyghur region, also the outside Uyghurs. They want to silence us by that. Also, because of my reporting, Chinese government put my name on their wanted list, also label me as a terrorist. So, but I am proud to have that label, actually, by Chinese government. Of course, they are the true terrorists in the world, terrorist government, actually. So to documenting, reporting Uyghur issue is the most hard work these days, because Chinese governments turn our country like open prison, high-tech surveillance system. And because of that, we barely can connect it with the Uyghur people in the East Turkestan. So some connection who have between Uyghur region, the very important source for us, actually. We been focusing even the social media. Maybe Uyghur people wants to send to the world some information, some important events, we have the focus. So we very carefully look over all the information came out from the Uyghur region. Even some people have the courage to, they use somehow technology to direct, give us some information. It's fascinating to see the people, try so hard, even facing dangers to, wants to the information out to the world. Why? Because they expecting world can react, to save them. But I'm not sure, are they really truly know the world didn't do, much, the immediate action to save them, but they still have that hope. And because of Chinese government do everything to silence us, who's right now willing to speak front of camera, front of, the world, to the Western media? I think they are heroes, in who's in the Susan's book, all those women are the hero because you are targeted by, one of the most developed, country right now in the world, second, large economically, and the CCP is target. So it means very dangerous, situation. But those women who can stood up for their people, for their family, is incredible. It's incredible. So also those people also giving us so many, reason to continue our work, no matter what cost. So we have to report all those because we are in the free country. We can say whatever we said, but the people in the region, the people who've been targeting by CCP, they can speak out. Why not we, right? So maybe I am out of your question right now. Yeah.
Your question.
Yeah, it's extremely important. Even like Razia mentioned, this heinous crime, China been toward the Uyghurs. It not only affect us, the first generation, also affect our family members, our next generation, maybe next generation, we don't know. And also giving them support, giving them hope is very important these days. So I'm really admired the UHRP's work on that issue to help Uyghur society to how to, survive in this hard situation.
Cool, it's a great answer. Thank you very much. I want to briefly encourage people who are listening online to post questions in the comments function if there's anything in particular you'd like to ask. I still have a long list of questions and would do this for the rest of the day if my fellow panelists would allow me. But I wanted to turn back to Susan, actually building on what Gul has just said about the possibilities of breaking the chain of intergenerational trauma and sort of shaping the future. In your first answer, you spoke about restoring and recounting information this way is giving you a certain distance from the abuses that you're describing. But you in the book talk about restoring as a means of narrative means to transformative ends. And I wanted to ask you to elaborate a little bit on that, about what you hope to see as a result of this work for the community.
Thank you, Sophie. That's a great question. What I liked about these narratives is, well, first of all, these women were so resourceful and they seem to have the intuition to leave China at the right time through various means. And most of them are very well trained, highly educated, but instead of pursuing a career in their field, they chose to become activists. So that's a kind of sacrifice, which they just talked about. And one thing about these, I think when you read about what's going on in Xinjiang, you often just read about the numbers of people who disappeared or who died, and it's kind of very depressing, and people think, oh, I don't want to hear that. But if you actually hear a story by an attractive, intelligent woman describing her childhood and the, fairly minor discrimination she encountered at university or at school, and then later on the more heavy-handed persecution and not being able to get a job, and then some of them had witnessed the Gulja incident, the massacre at Gulja, and also Urumqi. And at that point, they really feel there's danger here and they should leave. So it's kind of a story that makes you listen to what's happening, like how a genocide is coming about. So it's kind of fascinating and terrifying, but you're studying it from a lower level of the human experience and an individual story, and then having 10 women in the group all tell their story, you know, from different angles. I think this will convince everybody about what's going on. I mean, there was the whole question, oh, is it really a genocide, or is it just, you know, I think everyone will be convinced. And when I started this project at McGill and hired these two Uyghur research assistants that became my co-authors, I didn't want to use the word genocide. I said, it's too heavy-handed a word. We don't want to use that. It's, you know, it's too emotional. I have to be objective and all this. And of course, after about a year, I said, okay, you can use that word. But I've also interviewed, I started a project of interviewing second generation Uyghurs activists in Canada and the US. And they're really fascinating. And it gives me, I feel it's very encouraging, because I feel the Uyghur culture will survive. I mean, it may never be able to go back to China. We don't know what'll happen there. But I feel it will be strong in the West. So it'll continue. And obviously it'll change like every other culture that comes to the West, but the essence will still be there. So I find the younger activists really inspiring and fascinating. And so I think this book is actually, I don't think it's a depressing book. I think it gives people hope.
Thanks, Susan. I did have the same reaction, that I read it and thought, what an extraordinary group of human beings, you know, to have, you know, and all that people are doing, and particularly the women activists who are profiled, to do everything from, you know, preserve culture and language, to raise and educate families, to reach out across diaspora communities, to reporting on it. You know, it's if you just extracted from the book the list of all of the accomplishments that are discussed, it's extraordinary. We've got a question from the audience that I'd like to ask each of the panelists to respond to. The question is, how do you draw the line between cultural preservation versus host country adaptation, and what would happen if your values were challenged? Whoever wants to take a stab at this is welcome to. Razia, I think you said you had some thoughts on this.
Oh, this is great question. Actually, this Chinese government always want to mix up this use as propaganda. Oh, we are helping Uyghur people to adapt in Chinese society. That's why we are they're killing, they're destroying for culture. They justified on this way. So I would like to give an example. For example, in Canada, we have a huge population, population of all kind of all immigrants. For example, big population India, immigrants comes to India from China and from East Turkestan, even Akashinja. So we are very well adapted in Canada. We are working, we are studying, we are good citizens. However, at the same time, we are living in our cultural way. We can speak our languages in, at least at home, in community. We can dress whatever we want as Uyghur. We practice our religion. We are free here. We are well adapted in this society, contributing to society, and as well as we are living our culture. This is all different. Can we do in China? Can we do in our homeland? Our language is destroyed, our culture is destroyed, our people is destroyed. Back in China, we grew up in China. We learned, we got our university degree, our study, our language, everything is in back in China, back in mainland proper, China proper, and back to our East Turkestan. Even there are lots of university in Uyghur language. It used to have lots of university taught in Uyghur, in our mother language. We were very well adapted, but they are still try to destroy our culture, language, our people. This is a difference. It's not question of adaptation, drawing a line between adaptation and adaptation to society and it keeps the cultural tradition. You are perfectly able to adapt this society very well and keep your cultures. That's lots of examples in West, in Canada, in US. Everybody keeping their culture, but they are contributing at the same time, contributing to society. They are very well adapting. So this is a little bit, I can say this is like a little bit like similar propaganda of China mixed together and justify their action for destroy this our culture. So
That's a great answer. Thank you. Anybody else want to jump in?
Yeah, I just to add, I mean, to this question, I mean, adaptation, it doesn't mean assimilation. I mean, the adaptation, you know, we adapt the society, the law, culture, everything of the host country. It doesn't mean that, you know, we should accept all other countries or integrate into something different. Because the essence of freedom and the democracy is allowing you to be free to exercise your culture, free to exercise your freedom of speech, and free to do whatever you want to do. So in that kind of environment, I don't think there is a contradiction between keeping your culture and identity, living your life, and at the same time, be integrate into society, respect that host country, and do what you can to contribute in the society positively. It's not contradictory at all. Because I live in Australia. The Australia values multiculturalism and different culture. They respect, highly respect. They fund to flourish your culture and educate children in their own tongue, own mother language. And they fund for that. And I managed it over 10 years for Uyghur language school in Australia. And this was fantastic because Department of Education supported us, funded us to do that. So that means with that, the Uyghurs were able to practice their own language, learn their own language, practice their own culture, religion, everything. But at the same time, they are contributing hugely into Australian society too. They are law-abiding, great citizens of Australia. And that's what I have witnessed it, and a huge contribution into the society as well. You can see well-developed, well-educated academics within the Australian academic sector, politics, social society, social service, everything. You will see even law everywhere. So if you give a people the freedom to do what they want to do, that's the essence of living, I believe. It's key. I mean, that's how we're born. We're born to be free, not oppressed, not suppressed, or not, just listening to one party, one system, be one person. What China is doing, you either have to become Chinese, otherwise you're dead. That's the treatment against the Uyghurs. That's the meaning of China's one, the bilingual education policy, re-education, or, unified society, so-called unified society, happy society. For them, in order to be happy, developed, educated as someone important, you have to become Chinese. You have to ignore your identity as a Uyghur. You have to give up your belief, your religion, your freedom, everything. You have to listen to the party, Chinese Communist Party, Chinese government, and become Chinese. But with that, can you see the real happiness among the people? Not only us. Tibetans are not happy. Mongols, Indo-Mongolians are not happy. Other minorities are not happy. Hui Muslims are not happy. None of the people are happy. But in the West, nobody cares what you do because it's freedom. So people are just happy to live however they want to live. But at the same time, they are contributing something with the happiness. If you're not happy, if you're not in the peace, if you're not comfortable with something, how would you contribute? How would you become? How your brain works well? So that's my point. So to me, especially in terms of Uyghur population, the countries where they live, so far I have not heard, I have not seen as a elected president for Uyghur Congress, just close the works whole Uyghur community around the world. They are adopted very well to the society. At the same time, they are protecting, preserving the culture, that's how it's supposed to be. And that's the life that Uyghurs are looking for, free, democratic society. Thank you.
Thanks, Zubaira. Gul, I'm actually going to come to you next with a question from the audience before coming back with one final question, because we're getting close to the top of the hour. One of the audience members is asking essentially about transnational repression and harassment and wants to know, how do you reconcile being an activist, in your case a journalist, and facing this kind of proxy punishment?
This is a hard question. Somebody asked this question trying to make me cry also. Yeah. So transnational persecution is a serious issue, as we all know. For that, our family members are the, suffering the most. We even know what they're going through in the camp or in the jail even. For example, I just saw my mother and my brother in Chinese national TV forced to speak against me. So that moment is after 5 years long, I didn't saw their face. And I couldn't believe my eyes. My mother changed a lot, and my brother especially. But from that TV, then my brother speaking to the person who interviewed him even didn't look at the camera because he doesn't want to send the message, I am speaking to you. I believe my feeling. And also my mother. And the connection between kid and mother, nobody can cut. Between siblings, Chinese government cannot control your thoughts, your heart. So they know why we are doing this, and they proud. And we believe this. That's why we continue, because they are the people who raise us. This is the land who raised us as a Uyghur, pride Uyghur. So I believe I came to America for this faith, for contribute to my people when they need me. So I believe other Uyghurs too. So in our religion, so when you suffering injustice, one day you will be rewarded. So that belief give us hope, give us, I think, example, me, I gain, so much when I think the religious way. Whatever happened for reason, we believe that, and then nobody can take out freedom from your heart and your mind. Today, maybe Chinese government can kill one generation, but if the woman like us standing still, giving testimony to the world, my nation, Uyghurs, will be free one day, will be achieve their dream, and is Turkestan. So It's in our blood. The freedom is in our blood. So I am proud of my family and all Uyghurs, and proud of me too. That's why I'm continuing.
Thank you very much. I wanted to just hand the mic back for a moment as we get ready to wrap up to Susan, if she has any other thoughts for us as we learn more about the idea of restoring, and also to thank her for this, and to all of the people who contributed stories to this wonderful work. Susan.
Well, thank you, Sophie, for doing such a great job. This has been a wonderful panel. And as far as I think the story has to go on. And what I would want to do is encourage these wonderful women I interviewed to write their life story, just like Gul Cherya did. When I interviewed Gul, I didn't know she was writing her biography, which is fantastic. In fact, when I read her interview, I thought this would make a fabulous biography, but she was doing it already. So I think they all should do it. But I think also second generation Uyghurs in the West should write their stories, and they shouldn't be afraid to speak up. They shouldn't be shy. I find, as an academic, students are really, especially grad students, are very nervous about doing a research project. They're afraid they'll do the wrong thing or people would criticize them. They're really shy. And they really need encouragement. People need to hear from the next generation. So I think it's our job to encourage them.
That's great advice, Susan. Thank you so much. And I think there are already a number of extraordinary activists, Uyghur activists in the next generation, who I think probably take up their work partly because of the extraordinary role models that they have in Razia and Gul and Zubaira. And I'm sorry, we have to wrap up. Like I said, I would sit here and talk to this group all day if I could, but we've promised our audience a crisp hour. So please join me in thanking Susan for an incredible book and for Razia and Gul and Zubaira's remarkable interventions. It's really been wonderful to learn more from you this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Oh, that was it. Wow.